Everyone, my name is James. Hello, everyone. My name is James Williams, Mr. Connectivity, and a very warm welcome to this Vox Solutions McKinsey webinar. Now, many of you will know me from the world of business messaging, and I'm pleased to say this webinar is exactly about that topic. The topic of business messaging is important and critical ultimately to every single organization on this planet. With over 300 million listed businesses around the world, 5.7 billion unique mobile subscribers, every one of those subscribers can be reached by one specific channel, and that channel is SMS. Now, SMS is not new. It's been around since December the 3rd, 1992. But from an application to person perspective, so if you want to call it B2B, B2C perspective, a business perspective, it really is something that has captured the imagination of so many around the world. That's fantastic. And it draws a huge following. But the industry is facing headwinds and challenges. And I've come together here with the CEO of Vox Solutions, Essam, welcome. Theodore from Vox Solutions, Chief Business Officer and Chief of Staff. A very warm welcome to you. And I'm very pleased to be joined by two people from McKinsey. We have Mateusz Wozniak and Łukasz Maslaniec. Maslaniec, is it Edge or Ek? I apologize.
Don't worry, it can be Edge or Ek, whatever you prefer.
Fantastic, whatever works. A very warm welcome to you from McKinsey as well. So the topic of business messaging, let's get straight into this. The title, as it says, is How Can Mobile Network Operators Ensure Future Revenues from A2P Messaging? Now, mobile network operators are the absolute key to the messaging ecosystem. Ultimately, the way I phrase it, they own the last mile, so to speak, to these 5.7 billion unique mobile subscribers. So they have a very, very important role to play. But it's also fair that they receive some of the revenue from this big business. But let's get straight into it. I'd like to start with you, Mateusz. What's your take on the business messaging space? Where is it at the moment from your perspective?
Fantastic. First of all, I'm glad to be here and really excited about this dialogue that we have here. Look, we are extremely excited and passionate about business messaging space. This is a truly important space for all of us, for us as people, as human beings, for small businesses, for big businesses, pretty much relevant across the board. Now, this space is also interesting from the professional standpoint because the space is definitely being disrupted, and there's a whole bunch of different tailwinds. There's a whole bunch of different headwinds that are penetrating this space. We like to think of business messaging space as the place that has application to person SMS. We like to look at this as a space that also includes RCS, which is Rich Communication Services. We also like to look at this space as a place that also has over-the-top channels. So there's actually a whole bunch of different communication channels, and we believe that you can pick the right one, the one that sort of allows you to maximize your return on investment. And if we look at this space, this is the space where A2P SMS was historically the channel that was dominating. It still is. However, if you look into the future, and if I reflect on our recent work, where we look actually deeply at that segment, we see that this is the market that is about to grow at 1 to 2% CAGR until 2028. But at the same time, if you look at broader messaging space, there is also something that we are excited about that's called RCS, and this is something that is growing at a very significant double-digit growth. The jury is still out, so we will see how this plays out. But this is potentially something better, something that's richer, something that will allow both MNOs and businesses to really disrupt and reinvent this digital messaging space. So very much looking forward to what the future unfolds.
Yeah, so it's a good point mentioning RCS business messaging. RCS is not new. The concept of it has been around since 2007. But thanks to Apple's announcement and more operators actually, first of all, supporting RCS and then RCS business messaging, and then the Apple deployment of it. At the moment, there are only 19 operators globally that do that, but that number will increase by a big factor in the coming 12 months. But at the core of it, as you mentioned, the central pillar of this mobile engagement is A2P SMS. I'd like to now come to Ehsan, the CEO of Vox Solutions. Ehsan, your journey into SMS, you started off in the world of voice, and voice, of course, still plays an important role in business communications as well. But SMS, what's your take on the world of A2P SMS today?
I mean, the way also Matthias mentioned, I think it's exciting, still is exciting market. We see new opportunities come like RCS, RBM, what we call it also value-based pricing, which offer support different use cases with different value to be priced differently. We see ad tech coming, using the data to enable targeted marketing and targeted advertising. So SMS A2P transforming and evolving, and I think there is a lot of opportunities for all the players to tap in and to grow, to grab for the years coming.
For sure. So less than 10% of businesses globally actually use business messaging. Many of them don't use it to great effect. And there's a lot of talk about AI and artificial intelligence, particularly around the area of customization and personalization of messaging. And I think we're seeing generally around the world that could be a really nice driver for business messaging. Lukasz, I'd like to bring Lukasz, Engagement Manager with McKinsey, into the conversation. Welcome to the show. Can we have your take on it as well? And just, I touched there on AI and what other thing, the personalization element and what could grow business messaging. What are you seeing from your perspective and the McKinsey global perspective here?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of personalization and Gen AI, so this is one of the actually emerging trends that we see, and I think we're gonna talk about that in a second also. Yeah. But this is one of the main trends that is driving, let's say, the perspective on connectivity on A2P SMS in the future. So if I'm about to say in a little bit more about that, it's all that AI and Gen AI will create some additional use cases for more personalized and accurate informations with the customer. So now, the costs of creating personalized information, for example, to James, to Ehsan, or to Mateusz, is by far lower than if I need to hire a copywriter that would do it individually and personalized message to every single person. Now we can do it with a few clicks with ChatGPT or Gemini. And what type of impact it will have, let's say, on MNOs and on enterprises is that, of course, if we are talking about MNOs, that we believe that there will be the revenue increase through additional traffic from these new use cases, this Gen AI based and AI triggered use cases for MNOs. So that will be additional, let's say, wave of traffic. And in terms of of the enterprises, we believe that at the end of the day, enterprises will be able to improve their ROI on marketing and sales campaigns. Because right now, if we look on the traditional A2P traffic, traditional A2P SMS, enterprises are sending waves of marketing communication, regardless if if I want to sell, I don't know, like a sports shoes, I don't know if I'm sending that to sports enthusiasts, to people who hike, or to people who never went, to the mountains. But with this personalized SMS and so on, I will be able to, to trigger them better. So at the end of the day, I believe that summing up what I just said, that Gen AI and AI will bring both benefits, will have positive effect on both MNOs and on the enterprise side.
Fantastic, Lukasz, thank you very much. Theodore, Come on in, come on down. Let's have your take on this, because there are various sub-segments. Lukasz touched upon the marketing side of things, and it is important to realize that with business messaging, so much of the conversation is around two-factor authentication and security, particularly when it comes to A2P SMS and what major brands are doing with regard to that. But we've got to remember as well, there are marketing, there's transactional, there are other use cases around, but this is the big thing, there's a big difference perhaps in national and international traffic as well.
Correct. So, I mean, you're right with what you're saying. Let me maybe perhaps take a step back. So I think this conversation has two sides. There's the, let's say, mid to long-term side, and then there's the short-term side. I think Matt and Lukasz and Ehsan and yourself are right to mention, right? There's a lot of opportunities in business messaging today, and I'm sure they will continue to grow as businesses need to connect more and more with their customers, irrespective of the segment that they serve. There's a lot of interesting opportunities out there, right? You have the rise of, let's say, IP-based channels, right? You also have AI and Gen AI that are, let's say, helping push the market size grow. But I think as of today, right, we still see, as James, as you've mentioned, say 2.5% of MNOs have joined the RCS project, right? Kamara, Open Gateway are also other projects that are in discussion.
APIs, yeah.
Still, in terms of APIs, where let's say the market is not growing as fast. So I think it will be very interesting to see the industry 12 months from now. But I think as of today, a very large percentage of the opportunities still exist within the SMS space, which is interesting. And we should also ask the question, okay, what do we do about that, right? Because if we're talking about mobile network operators, it's pretty clear that they need a strategy in order to adapt, right? Your question is on point in the sense that there are different segments in the market. So maybe for everyone's context, the business, or let's say the A2P market today is split, if you want, by segments within national use and international use. So that is to say that every mobile network operator has a service to serve local enterprises within the given country and a service to serve international enterprises, right? Now, if we look at the international side, because it's important to understand the dynamic, say 90% of all demand comes from one-time password, 2FA, which is what James mentioned, right? And it's mostly used by very large organizations out there that need a reliable, secure, and well-priced service in order to deliver that to their customers to complete the different processes that they need to do. On the national side, however, you have more variety. Let's say on the national side, there's more marketing traffic, more demand for notifications, and a lot of players that you need to serve in a different way, right? The international side, perhaps every operator is getting 80-90% of the demand for its A2P SMS service from 20 large companies, whereas on the local side, you have hundreds of enterprises to serve, right? Inherently, these are very different and how they're priced. So I think today what we see is on the international side is facing more challenges, but we'll get into this, I think, perhaps a bit later. The GSMA also mentions that there will be pressure on also the national side if we're talking about A2P SMS. So maybe good to take a step back and ask ourselves what is there to be done, right, in order to make sure that operators have sustainable business within the coming years.
Yeah, fantastic. So like you mentioned there, Taylor, it's clear there is huge scope for growth, and it's about bringing online all these small organizations who aren't using A2P SMS today. And I think this is where mobile network operators come in. But let's frame the discussion here. What we all of you watching this and all of us speakers have got to be mindful of is that for mobile network operators around the world, most of them, business messaging is just 1 or 2% of their annual revenue. But for some of them, particularly with this differentiation in certain operators between national and international pricing, that figure can go considerably higher. So business messaging is most definitely not the same in all countries. And by the way, I did forget to say, shame on me at the beginning, if you have any questions, please do ask the panelists and speakers any questions. We have the Q&A open and I can see that and our other speakers can see that. So feel free to go ahead and do that. Ehsan, very, very quickly coming back to you, that the A2P market as a whole, what's your personal perspective? Evolving up or down, and so in general, but then also regionally, how do you see that breaking down? Because there are going to be some bigger countries and some regions where A2P SMS is performing better than others. What are you seeing from a Vox perspective?
I think very good question. What we see that is among the operators that we have partnership with is that in some markets, the volumes of SMS is declining, mainly because the increase in rates, because most of the mobile network operators looking around, they look at in the region and they see that the neighbor countries, they sell SMS at 10 cents, 15 cents or above. And they say, okay, this means that we should also increase the rate. So some of them, they increase the rate. That could lead to decline in volumes, because mobile, like any company, enterprises also, they have their own budget. Of course, above a certain level, just given a, not just to put a number next to it, I mean, above 3 cents, 4 cents, 5 cents, we start to see a huge decline on the marketing, international marketing messages. And then when the rate go above 10, 15 cents, we start to see also decline on the OTP. So it is clear that the different use cases, they have different price elasticity. And what mobile network operators, they done up until now, they were blocking gray routes with help of firewall providers, differentiate international and national. And some of them, I would say they squeeze the international SMS, especially OTP, at maximum. So that is not sustainable anymore. I mean, they cannot grow, they cannot expect growth there either anymore. What they can do is, so that part in some regions that the rate is high, reached the tapping point and eventually started to decline, right? In some markets that the rate is still below 5 cents, eventually there is still room for rate increase, and they may see still increase in revenue. But wherever the rate is 10, 15 cents, or in this range or over 5 cents, we may see a decline in the volume for OTP use case. So what can be done? So that part eventually will decline. The volumes will decline on those regions, on those mobile network operators. But what mobile network operators, they can do in order to compensate is to focus on the other use cases, like marketing, like notification, transaction. And usually most of mobile network operators, they don't have such a platform yet. What we call it value-based pricing. Mainly you price differently for different use cases. So use cases that right now they cannot use SMS because it's too expensive for them, like notification, maybe like some others, utility, whatever. If by giving them lower rate, you enable, you motivate them and you enable them to use SMS, that can bring extra volume and revenue.
But you can only do that if you have a great means of actually gaining full visibility of all the traffic coming into your network and then are able to actually control it perfectly.
Of course, things are, I'm talking about the mobile network operators that they already have a firewall, they already have an proper analytics, they already monetize their international SMS, national and SMS, international SMS A2P, and they have differentiation in place for international and for especially for OTP use case. Because most of the international A2P nowadays is OTP use case, security use case, authentication use case, due of higher price elasticity. But I'm talking about those MNOs, right?
No, understood.
They have nothing in place yet, no firewall analytics. they need first to implement the basics. If they are not there, monetize their A2P versus their P2P, then A2P national versus international. Then next step is monetizing different use cases, trying to demonetizing different use cases, and eventually later on step into RCS, RBM, rich messaging, and tap into that space as well. So depend on which stage each the MNO is, there is a different next step. But for all the MNOs, I think there is a next step. There is things that they can do to attract more revenue, and
for sure.
Some of MNOs, they use SMS at highest potential right now.
Bush, can I just mention two things here, I think, for all the viewers as well. It's important to recognize. Number one, when we're talking about higher priced A2P SMS markets, we're not just talking here about developing countries as well. I was at an event in Germany several weeks ago, and in Germany, only 8% of the A2P SMS market is marketing. And that's because the rate in Germany is 7 euro cents or above. Whereas you come to where I am at the moment, my home country, the UK, where the price is less than half that, it's a totally different picture and a different story. And of the market, perhaps a quarter, a third is marketing related. So it's a very, very different market. So you can't have this perception that higher priced markets are just the developing world and the developed world is totally different. It isn't. And if you move to the US, where the rates are viewed as being very, very low compared to most places, they've got an amazing, super strong A2P SMS market. That's the first thing. And secondly, as well, this definition of international, what defines a business being international? That is something that is debated, and it's a hot topic in many countries and operators. But thank you very much, Ehsan. I'd like to get back to McKinsey and Mateusz. So the market, and it's definitely evolving. Are there operators out there that you're seeing, that you're talking to, that still are to get their heads around the A2P SMS opportunity? Because it's easy to think we've got a channel that's over 30 years old. It seems that everyone has got a firewall, everyone's doing something with regards to control and monetization. But is that the case? Are there still operators out there who really don't understand this space?
That's a very good question, and I think very catchy, right? Look, I would say the following. I do believe that there is an awareness. There is also an excitement about the opportunity, but many times what's lacking is the action or execution, right? And as Ehsan outlined, it takes a bit of steps, right, to get there, to be good at this, right? At the SMS monetization, it's not only and unfortunately, many times we see it, right, that MNOs like to default to just a simple, price setting, and then they believe that everything will solve, automatically. Whereas there is actually a whole bunch of different challenges that those MNOs needs to face. There is rise of all different fraudulent activities in many regions, especially in Europe, but in other regions as well. We see more scrutiny from regulators. So there is, short answer is, in our view, this is still an untapped opportunity. There is still plenty of MNOs out there that need to really rethink the way they monetize A2P SMS. And there's a bit of homework that needs to be done. The positive side, though, is that it's not a rocket science. I would say there's few examples out there of MNOs that do it correctly, that do it in a way we would call it, best in class or best practice, if you will. And you can learn from them. What's interesting, right, is to your earlier point, James, it's not only developing countries, right? We see it like all over the globe. We see it in developed economies in Western Europe. We also see it in some of the developing areas in Asia. But it's going to be a journey. It's fascinating. It only shows and proves to us that this is still an area that can be optimized, can be improved.
Totally. How many times have we heard from people, oh, SMS is dead? Look, I've been in telecoms over 30 years. I've heard that so many times over the years. And SMS it's like that journeyman boxer that travels around and it still fights and it still wins. It might not be the flashiest, but it still gets there. We've got some great questions coming in. We've got a few regarding the pricing. I've typed an answer in there as well. I know Ehsan has been responding on that. We have a question from Taleb and Jawal in Palestine. And it's a really, really good question, actually. And if someone would like to pick this up, do you see SMS becoming obsolete at some point? Will operators be required to implement RCS at some point to maintain connection between applications and their customers? Theodore, your hand was up. Go for it.
Well, first of all, let me perhaps give a bit of context. I think, listen, and I'll come to the question, but sorry for the, let's say, pragmatic answer, but let's be a bit maybe real. This year has been, because James' question has been, is the market going up or down? Correct? The question.
Correct.
And I think perhaps if we go to the first slide, we can look at, this is a figures question, right? This is, I think we understand that this year has been declared, let's say, the tipping point in A2P SMS growth, right? If we're talking about business messaging specifically. Yeah. Now, this is not to say if it's perspective of me, Theodore, or Ehsan, but rather we should look at, let's say, consensus within the industry, right? So if we're looking at, for example, what the GSMA is saying, there's declaring that this year, international A2P SMS went down, and for the next 5 years, A2P SMS market will go down in terms of revenue by 5% year on year, right? Now, that is for both national and international, right? Well, Matt has mentioned at the start the following thing. The business messaging space, as overall, it's growing, right? A2P SMS less so, right? Which means some segments, subsegments of business messaging are performing better than A2P SMS, right? That's what it means. So we've also been in, for some of you that have been perhaps in WAS rather conferences this year on business messaging, we've run, let's say, similar events and had the chance to talk to tens of operators. We also work with quite many networks. We're quite aware of the landscape. When you ask MNOs around the globe, but we'll go also to your regional question, James, how is it going? Most of them say that this year they've seen demand for A2P SMS go down, right? And I think this is on spot illustrated by the GSMA. Now, the question is, does it differ by, why is that the case? Does it differ region by region? Does it differ segment by segment, right? Now, let's take perhaps the segment bit. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that GSMA also says that international A2P SMS is the one to face more challenge, right? So it says 7% will be the, let's say, decline per year. Whereas for national A2P SMS or A2P SMS used for local businesses, it will be less than that, right? So that speaks of a problem. That speaks of a scenario where there are things we need to optimize today for a, let's say, sustainable path for mobile network operators, right? Because let's ask ourselves this question. Enterprises want to communicate more with customers. SMS has great reach. The fact that it's being less and less used signals that something is not right with it, right? It's not managed properly. So I think the main reasons that also the other colleagues have mentioned before are prices has increased very high. There's new types of fraud. And there's the obviously competition, right, from IP-based alternatives, right? And I think competition in this case can really, push everyone further, right? The son talked about use case pricing. That's innovation in the commercial model, right? That's doing SMS, for example, in a better way. That's also something to look at. Now, what this is basically saying is that these will disrupt the local market after the international market or less than the international market, which is in line with what we see today in the market. Now, a question of James is also, does it differ region by region? That's a very good question. So I can tell you, I'd say we're in a privileged position to be invited to multiple RFPs and are asked for help from MNOs globally. So I can tell you what the regional view is. Countries or regions that have increased prices before others to price points that are not very sustainable are facing higher decline. So actually, I think as part of the same study that GSMA did, they found that the decline is highest within APAC, around 10% a year, CIS countries around 8% a year. MENA then declines, I don't know, 5-7% a year. Latin America, Europe, and Sub-Saharan Africa, let's say, are the ones that are facing least decline. On Sub-Saharan Africa, this is a matter of development, right? There's still so much to do there, and that will grow demand, let's say, organically, if you want to put it that way. But the story of Europe is the one to look at. The story of Europe is what James is saying. Prices have been stable. Prices have been, say, just about right. And when you're talking to operators in Europe, SMS demand does not necessarily go down by more than, I don't know, 5%, 1%, plus 1%. It depends, right? So I think there's lessons to be learned, and that goes back to the conversation we had earlier. Going back to the question on RCS, will SMS consolidate and will it die? Now, listen, I think studies today, and I'm not saying that we're all right? This is a forecast. It's up to everyone that is here within this webinar and everyone in any operation to take decisions for their own business in order to make sure that they're better than the average, better than what a study suggests, right? Now, current studies say that SMS will be 60% of the volume it is today in 5 years. That's similar to the path of voice, but only in a shorter amount of time, right? Now, that doesn't mean that SMS will be dead. As a matter of fact, you'll need SMS to reach a whole segment of the population that cannot be reached otherwise. Then RCS, but there's also a scenario where we don't land on 60%. We land on 80% of the volumes that are today, and that is in the power of mobile network operators to have a good pricing strategy and a good strategy all around. But I'm not going to go into that because I expect probably everyone else to chip in on, and when we get to that point. Now, will RCS be forced, mandatory everywhere? Listen, I don't think so. First of all, for RCS, we need cooperation from large organizations that have not historically, got along very well. We have Google, we have Apple, we have Huawei in the picture. Well, we all hope that RCS will be available and an alternative, a rich alternative, right? And operators can also take a stance on and deploy their business messaging services. But predicting this is a bit difficult. So I think RCS, in short, will grow, will become an alternative that can be used. Operators will choose to deploy it or not, and provide a rich alternative to SMS to their local enterprises. They'll do it as part of a comprehensive A2P strategy and done in a way that it doesn't cannibalize what their A2P SMS business is currently doing.
Yeah, it's a good point, Tado. And I think there's also an element that we haven't mentioned yet, regulation, that comes into play. There are certain countries out there that from a security perspective would want, particularly when it comes to two-factor authentication, the actual bearer channel of that to be from what they deem to be a trusted party and mobile network operator. So for example, Indonesia is moving towards banning two-factor authentication from chat apps such as WhatsApp, and focusing then on carrier-based channels for 2FA, such as SMS. So the regulation aspect cannot be ignored as well, and varies massively around the world as well. So yeah, great points there. Lukasz, bringing you back into the conversation and the McKinsey perspective. We've talked about the challenges and the headwinds of, let's talk A2P SMS specifically. What are the real challenges you're seeing globally to A2P SMS in a nutshell?
Challenges to A2P SMS, right?
Yeah.
So let me think about it. Mostly, one of the points that we discussed was the point about personalization, right? And I think I've already said that, that personalization is right now, the A2P SMS is a big wave of non-personalized SMS that are hitting people, and then the ROI is relatively low. So with the emergence of, as we said, like more personalized SMS, for example, through ad tech, also like RCS, that would be one of the challenge, right? Another challenge that I see, and now I'm talking about, let's say, the headwinds, not so the challenges, right? I think you said about of course the protection and regulation, so I won't be dwelling on that, but there is a point with frauds, and frauds in terms of like how the different, let's say, shady organizations are taking the data from customers. I mean, most of you have probably experienced I'm experiencing that every month, like some fraudulent SMS or contacts even from WhatsApp asking me for some data. And this is something that definitely is a challenge. And like, for example, when we are talking about RCS, then when you are sending SMS, it's difficult to validate who has really sent this information to you as an end user. With RCS, it's like potentially easier because you will have an RCS map platform that validates that, like for example, company ABC from Germany is really the company ABC from Germany. So it's not this is not present in A2P SMS. I mean traditional A2P SMS. So that would be the second challenge. So we spoke about like competition. We spoke about frauds, and also like costs. I think that this is like the third challenge, because what you can see is that many of the companies, they are moving from as we said, one-time passwords to push notifications. And for example, I believe all of you are already using Microsoft Authenticator. So for example, if we are like 1 year ago, when I wanted to log into Teams, Microsoft Teams, then I had to validate myself with one-time password through SMS. Now I'm getting a pop-up in Microsoft Authenticator, and I don't need to do it. So this is basically like the cost perspective. Yeah. And generally, maybe just last point about the competition. So as we said, but it's not only RCS. It's also like it's the WhatsApp, it's Viber. There are like platforms like Kakao and so on. So like all of these competitors, they will try to to take a piece of the pie that was taken over by A2P traditional SMS.
Perfect, Lukasz. Yeah, very, very good points. WhatsApp business messaging is something that's very big and very out there, and it's driving a lot of growth in business messaging. But of course, it doesn't really touch, well, it impacts massively the carriers, but this is the point. They don't really get any money for it. And so it's all about bringing channels or making channels more accessible to mobile operators. They can take their rightful share of the pie, because after all, they're the ones spending literally billions a year on spectrum, licenses, equipment, building out the networks, running the networks, etc., etc. So it's a very good point. And you raised also another good point on the brand verification side of things. Traditionally, in the A2P SMS world, this isn't done much. In the US, it's done quite a lot, because they've got something called the campaign registry. So every brand wishing to send SMS via a long code in the US is verified, and that verification is done very effectively at scale. So it can be done. It really, really can be done. And there's some great solutions out there. So thank you very much for that. Theodore, have you got anything to add on the challenges side of things? Because you had talked about the commercial model challenges already, and anything extra to add on top of what Lukasz said, or do you think that's all covered?
No, I think it's pretty comprehensive what has been mentioned. I think that the view that McKinsey and Lukasz has are in line with what everyone sees in the market. But I do think that some of them can be solved, right? So
Great.
if you want, we can, I don't know, maybe possibly address that.
Yeah, well, this is what we're coming to. So we've laid out the business messaging market. We've laid out the potential growth. We've laid out the challenges. We've laid out that A2P SMS still is the core channel within that, and it's got a very important role to play and why it has an important role to play. But practically speaking, Theodore, what can MNOs do to guarantee their place and their share of their business messaging pie?
That's a good question. There is no one size fit all, but there's few, let's say, good things that can be considered best practices all around the world. Now, in order to answer that properly, we should take a step back and summarize perhaps the challenges again, right? So we have SMS prices are too high compared to alternatives. Alternatives are gaining ground. There is fraud out there, right? Fraud scenarios that are evolving quite fast. Technology isn't every time or in every operation adapted to fit the pace that fraudsters keep, right? That's another thing. And free, I would say you also have, I don't know, the market is quite fragmented, right? You have 800 mobile network operators that basically need to take similar decisions in order to stabilize the space. We've also talked about, so that's what do we need to solve? Why do we need to solve it? Or why do operators need to solve it? You've mentioned that revenue from A2P SMS ranges at maybe 2%, right, on average for mobile network operators. That's about right. I think it's normally is between 1 to 5%, but we need to keep in mind that for most mobile network operators there, it accounts for up to 10-15% of EBITDA. So it's not only revenue is maybe perhaps not as significant, but the contribution it brings to the profit of the company is. As opposed to other services, this one is quite lucrative, quite profitable, and something that most CFOs are looking within mobile network operators to ensure sustainability for in the coming years, right? Second, it's a channel, as you've mentioned, a channel that operators today control in a way. And if we're looking at IP-based alternatives, and here I'm not talking about RCS, but everything else, there is limited collaboration, I think, at this point in time in order to have a framework where mobile network operators also chip into that and get a share of the pie, right? And then third, we go to the point that Lukasz just mentioned. SMS can be much more than a channel. It can bring additional value to what it delivers today, right? So the picture is the following. I think the market is going down, but there's a lot of potential. MNOs should make sure that they keep A2P SMS similar to the level they have it today. How do we do that? First of all, let's acknowledge this is not the time for 50% growth, right? I think we are here because I think across regions, right, everyone tried to grow revenues and expected that the market will not go down. We've reached the point where these expectations need to be leveled in a way, and I think that's why effort like the one that the folks at the GSMA are doing is very valuable, right? We need to first understand that this is a reality. Market will not grow at 10% year on year, right? But the figures mentioned are an average, which means some operators will still grow revenues and some will have a revenue decrease. It depends what strategy you take. So now let's not go and discuss what can be done. So I think there's 4 things to be mentioned, and I think they're the ones that are mentioned here on the slide.
Yeah.
But to summarize, I think the low-hanging fruit is stopping fraud. So listen, this is a discussion as old as business messaging.
It is. Can I just ask, talking about that, one of the questions from, we've got Walid Ali, is talking about flash call verification and something. And I know from my time with the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, it was you folks within Vox that first brought up this topic of flash calling globally. What is the impact and what has the impact been of flash calling on the A2P SMS space, and what can be done about flash calling?
Sure. So, well, listen, if we're talking about fraud, flash calling I think it's not categorized as one, right? So the first step was stopping fraud. You need good technology to do that. You need AI-based technology to do that, because fraudsters are quite fast, quite lucrative, and you'd be surprised, right? We have such technology. You would be very surprised of how creative people can be. Our technology is stopped around 750 to 800 of fraudulent patterns, or how you can basically spell out Facebook, or send OTPs for
Hang on, 700 different variants of
Yes, absolutely. So I mean,
Wow.
listen, that just speaks volumes, right? There is no
Yeah.
way that you can do it without proper technology. Now, going to Flash, this is the second alternative, because let's say this. Businesses want to communicate more with customers, SMS is going down. There's a problem, but still users want SMS. So users don't dislike SMS, right? So something in the middle is happening. What is happening is, because the prices went up of A2P SMS, the, say, players in the middle or aggregation chain has tried to focus and reduce the cost for enterprises, right? Because they couldn't sustain the growth that existed. And one of the solutions they found was flash calls. For anyone who's not familiar, flash calls are a way to authenticate mobile users by a missed call, right? For that, you have zero termination cost passed over to the mobile network operators. So so far, I mean, to speak a figure, I think, again, I look back to the GSMA, because I think we all, let's say, trust that source. Understanding is that flash call is around 10-12% today out of the entire A2P SMS market. We'll focus on international. That differs highly across regions. So this is highest within the Middle East, I think, CIS, and Asia Pacific. So basically in all the regions where the rates have increased faster than in the other ones. Now, what we can do about that is operators have the choice to take a stance, right? You can either choose to monetize flash calls, price it perhaps similar to A2P SMS, or block it. So we were actually, I think, first to our knowledge, maybe I'm wrong, to develop this solution. The core of it is to identify flash calls in real time, which is not simple. Not simple is an understatement of how difficult it is, because it's a missed call, right? So we need to figure it out properly. We give operators the chance to either block it or monetize it. It's up to them. But so far, I see that let's say 80-90% of operators block flash calls, and I think that's just like intrinsic answer, right? So you feel like someone was stealing something from you. I mean, quote unquote, right? But just like revenues for which you didn't have a deal on, and then they choose to defend that. But perhaps there's also something wrong with the approach, right? Because I think operators perhaps would have been willing, right, to just have a flash call service that was maybe lower priced than A2P SMS. And it would have been another channel that MNOs could control, right? Which was different to SMS, something additional. Some folks or enterprises could have liked it, but this is the path that we went, and this is the response that I see from mobile network operators.
Fantastic. Thank you, Taylor. Lukasz, McKinsey is all about giving advice at the end of the day. You're consulting, you're about giving advice. And a big point about A2P SMS is its sustainability and over the long term. I mentioned over the years, so many times people have said A2P SMS is dying, it's dying, but it's still around. It will still have, clearly, from what I'm hearing from you speakers today, a role to play in the coming years, although, of course, with other OTT players and the onset of RCS business messaging, that the market will change. But from your perspective, what would the key strategy points be? If I was a mobile network operator today, what would you be advising me about my A2P SMS strategy? Because I want something long-term and sustainable.
Sure. Thanks for the question. So James, maybe let's take one step back. And I know that Theodor already elaborated on that, whether A2P SMS is dead or not, but I like to think about A2P SMS as I'm thinking about cinemas. You know, when all of the Netflixes and all of the video on demand platforms, they entered the market, everybody was thinking that cinemas are dead. There's like
Blockbuster.
no way.
Remember, I'm old enough, Lucas, to remember Blockbuster, where you actually go and get the videos out, and people thought, "Oh, Blockbuster is going to kill the cinema market."
For example, right? So like like everybody was thinking that cinemas are dead. What turned out is that the cinemas are thriving. Actually, people go to cinemas to to indulge themselves. This is like the one of the cheapest entertainment you can have, and like there is a space for VODs. There is a space for, I don't know, I'm old enough to remember DVDs, and there is like a space for for cinemas. And I think it's exactly the same like with A2P SMS. So there will be always a space for A2P SMS, regardless if we are talking about OTT, regardless if we are talking about RCS. Obviously, like what we said is that the growth rate for A2P SMS is relatively stable. The market is growing by 1-2%, especially with RCS. That means that the market share of A2P SMS will be lower versus today, which is like normal activity, but it will still prevail. And now coming back to your question about like if I would be a person that is like the CEO of the MNO, what I would do, first of all, I would definitely try to provide like a seamless experience to all of the companies that use my network, like CPaaS players. So I would ensure that like all of the Twilios, Infobeeps, Cinches of this world, they have like like a good access to my network, and that basically for them it's quickly to to connect and to use my network to monetize my network. So my step number one would be to maximize my current monetization with A2P SMS. That would be from like through seamless experience
in a sustainable way. That's the important bit.
Of course.
Reasonable.
And about this sustainable, I will also say in a second. But second point, what I would do, I would try to be a little bit maybe more tough to aggregators who are using like gray routing, because right now like we can, and MNOs, they can identify if there's like aggregators in the market who are pretending to be P2P, who are doing more flash calls and so on, typically like small local ones. So I would try to be a little bit more tough, saying that, hey guys, you really want to like to squeeze my network, you really want to not to share like any revenue with me, I will do exactly the same if you continue doing that. So I will try to be a little bit more harsh, more tough to them, right? And then you said about sustainability. So what I've seen is that there are some MNOs who that are experiencing like the slowing revenue from A2P SMS. And what they did in turn to offset that is they increased the prices. But increasing the prices caused the lower traffic the next year. And this is a kind of like like a vicious circle, basically. So you need to have a kind of a plan. What would be my price versus like alternatives to ensure that my revenues from A2P are actually like like really sustainable, monetized over the long term. So that comes to to the bucket of maximizing the current monetization. And secondly, what I would do, I being like the CEO, I would try to open for the new opportunities. And the new opportunities is definitely, we spoke today, we've spent a lot of time on RCS. So creating a kind of like like a map platform that will enable to validate the sender per country. And I know that Google is also like working with MNOs to to have this map platform. That would be one. Second point would be like mobile operators, they have tons of customer data. There is a bunch of use cases how they can monetize this customer
That's
data.
APIs, Lukasz, that's APIs, trust APIs and everything along like that. And this is what Theodor was mentioning right at the beginning with Kamara.
Yeah, of course. So APIs is also another part, but I'm talking about like, silent authentication. I'm talking about like, all of the ad text and so on. So there is a lot of plays. And again, it's all about execution, because I think that the telcos, they know about that. It's not about, let's say, reinventing the wheel right now, but it's more about execution and basically like, making your hands dirty and execute in these new use cases.
Fantastic. Folks, we are 4 minutes 45 seconds away from the close to this webinar. So we're getting close to the end of it. We have a few questions to, I'm just looking at a few questions from the audience here. And I think there's a very nice one from Paul Ruppert, who I know is over in Washington in the US. Now, essentially what Paul is saying is that, look, A2P SMS has been going globally for years. It's had single-digit growth, and we seem to be stuck without any huge, vast growth in A2P SMS. And indeed, we've talked today that in many markets it's declining, or certainly at best, that growth is severely flattening off. What could, in a perfect world, what could we be doing as a market? So that's taking the aggregators, the mobile operators, technology providers. What could we all be doing to actually really give A2P SMS a good push upwards? What has the industry been doing wrong, in simple language? Because at the end of the day, we've got 90% of organizations out there aren't doing anything with it at the moment, business messaging.
I can take that if you want. So
yeah, thanks.
It's a very good question. So first of all, basis is stop fraud. You need this channel to be trusted, right? I know this is super simple and foundational to our entire conversation, but you'd be surprised what you see out there. So every operator, I mean, you can then put this burden on the enterprises or the operators. Normally, operators have been the ones to basically tackle this, right? There's technology available in order to stop fraud scenarios and have a reliable service. Once we get that out of the picture, we need sustainable pricing. I mean, we cannot, as an industry, increase prices year on year by double digit and expect for the same demand to be here in 5 years from now, right? I mean, it doesn't work like that. Any economic theory says that you price a service higher if the quality of the service is higher and to the value of the service. Now, the third point is exactly this price by value. So we've seen WhatsApp for Business coming into the market with a pricing strategy, which we can call disruptive in a way. And that is for, I don't know how many of you know, but WhatsApp does not price for business messaging one WhatsApp message as a fixed rate. So what the price differs on what you're using it for. So to give an example, if you're sending out a one-time password, then I don't know, country in Asia, it can cost 5 cents. For marketing, it will cost 8 cents. And for notifications, your doctor appointment is tomorrow, or DHL delivery is coming tomorrow, it will cost 1 cent, okay? So that means that we tailor pricing to the willingness to pay of enterprises, be them local or international, because a marketing message is bound to deliver more value, right? Or let's say a direct return on return on investment than a delivery from a courier company or from a reminder about an appointment tomorrow, right? So that's actually easier said than done, I think. But today, what GSMA says is this has hit the international market. It will hit the national market. And actually on the national market, on local A2P SMS, you have much more flavor, much more use cases to cater to, right? So MNOs today need to be willing and able to implement such commercial practices, right? I can also tell you, but I cannot give names, that there are multiple countries within Asia Pacific where 30% of their local traffic disappeared because all the notifications they had were basically disrupted. WhatsApp came with a lower price. There was one price for SMS, 3 prices for WhatsApp. Notifications was the cheapest one. This traffic left. But then what happens is the data Lukasz was talking about also leaves the room. You don't have that information anymore. You don't have that business anymore. Now, what you need to be, one thing operators need to be cautious about is for this, you also need technology, because similar to the arbitrage between P2P and A2P trunks, when you'll implement different prices for SMS, the folks that will want to send marketing traffic will send it over the trunk for notifications because that is cheapest. So we go back to, you know, same story, but that's easy to solve, right? I mean, that's not if you have good technology.
We have got to close. We should really have put this for 2 hours. We can talk about this topic for such a long time. I think if I can just summarize very, very quickly for everyone. First of all, thank you all for joining us for this Vox and McKinsey webinar. Been very, very insightful. I think for me, it's very clear to see from everyone what everyone's been saying is business messaging as a whole is growing. A2P SMS still has a very, very important role to play. But for me, the key thing is, and I still keep coming back to this, the fact that barely 10% of the listed businesses out there actually use business messaging. So Lukasz from McKinsey raised a very, very good point. We're talking about A2P SMS. We've talked about RCS, WhatsApp, business messaging, OTTs, all these various things. But at the end of the day, they're business messaging channels. And I suppose the real enemy is apathy and companies and organizations not using business messaging at all and not understanding how great business messaging is. So it's about getting across to there's millions of organizations that there's a huge opportunity here, and with the right partner, with solutions from companies like Vox Solutions, able to actually gain control over your network, and then you can choose what you want to do. Do you want to monetize, not monetize, block, not block? I think that is the way forward, and advice from companies like McKinsey who have a real global feel and flavor of what's going on. So thank you very much to all of you viewers. Thank you to the speakers. Apologies to the couple of questions we weren't able to get to during the session itself, but we look forward to seeing you at another webinar very soon. Thank you very much all. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.